So, oh my goodness, I get to have so much fun. It's unbelievable here on the floor of the National Religious Broadcasters Convention. I'm very excited about this interview that I have in front of me now as we're doing NRB Chronicles 2022. So, we have an author, Aaron Taylor, but Aaron's book has got a very compelling title. And it kind of grabs you because it says, "Do you love me?" There it is, a great big question mark, and then you got three choices. You would think it's either yes or no.
Well, do you remember when you were a little kid, first, second grade? I fell in love for the first time, thought it was love, and wrote a little note to a girl and said, "Do you love me?" Yes, no, and then I thought, well, that's a lot of commitment, maybe, and I put a maybe on there.
And did she say maybe?
She said no. I had a lot of them say yes and no and a few maybes, but worked for me.
And isn't that cool? I mean, isn't it cool how God reminds us of those original places where our hearts were tender and we're looking for acceptance? There were so many things, man, that I can remember when I was little and being smitten with love and getting this first taste of what that feels like. And so, anybody that looks at this title is going to kind of go back to that note because it's exactly what it looks like, right?
Right. That's what it was meant to be. Yeah.
And so take us there.
Well, it's a play on words from when John 21, when Jesus said to Peter, "Do you love me?"
And three times.
Yeah. And Jesus, Peter responds to him and says, "I love you." And I hate it when people use Greek and Hebrew terms and then define them. But in this case, you have to, because Jesus didn't say, "Do you love me?" He said, "Do you agape me?" And Peter didn't say, "I love you." He said, "I phileo you." Well, the difference is unconditional love versus brotherly love, or Philadelphia, if you're good to me, I'm good to you kind of love.
Right, and so do you mind if we go into that? Because
it's a great thing to go. It's really the basis of the book, which allows us to look at love in so many different ways that are powerful.
I studied this passage recently, and I do study Hebrew, but I also know a little Greek, and I certainly know the Greek that was used here because it's a classic study of Greek, right? But here you got three different,
kinds of
four different kinds
four
of
total.
Love. Yeah. So, but in the case of Hebrew, there's just one, by the way.
Right? No, I know.
Just one. And however, from my perspective, if you have a brother and you're a Jew, now this is their culture, right? That to Peter, what he saw was Jonathan and David were their souls were united. And so it wasn't like Peter saying, "Well, I kind of like you, Jesus." It wasn't that.
No.
He was saying, "Man, we are brother, we are, yeah, do you love me?" And he wasn't understanding Jesus is where Jesus was going.
See, I think he was.
Really?
Ready for this?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. So what is the best definition? Is it a Greek term? Now, the best definition of God's kind of love is what?
Right,
Jesus.
He laid down his life for his friends.
Right. And what he taught about love. So do you unconditionally love God? I know this is a lot to ask. You may not even be a believer. I think you are. But do you love God? I mean, how many people would raise their hand? I unconditionally, I agape love Jesus. See, I don't think Peter's doing it because, I denied Jesus. I don't think he's doing it because, I'm not quite for sure. Try this one for size. If you love God, if you unconditionally love God, did you love him first?
No, he loved me way.
Okay. Well, there's other. Okay, I get that. Did you love him when he denied you, spit on you, didn't care about you? Did you still love Jesus?
No.
Okay, but you still love God. So did you love God when he had nothing to offer you at all, and you had no expectations because he had nothing to give you in return? No, because he did. So I have a question for you. Is it possible that what Peter heard when he heard, "Do you love me unconditionally with the kind of love I've taught my whole ministry?" And Peter went, "I can't. But I can brotherly love you. I can love you like you loved me." And then what are the next words? So did he leave Peter with a hopeless inability to love him? No, not at all. He showed him how to love. He said, go feed my sheep. Go find somebody to love first. Don't wait for them to come to you. Go find somebody who doesn't deserve your love, but you're going to love them anyway. Go find somebody who can give you absolutely nothing and show them love. And when you've done it unto them, you've done it unto me. That's what I believe that interaction primarily was. Is Peter, yes, loving Jesus, but not knowing how to answer that question, and Jesus showing him how to truly love him.
Well, then that brings. I see
You
where you're
follow where I'm
going.
going?
Yeah,
All right.
took me a while to get there. But
Now
it
let's.
also follows what happened afterwards, right? Like he's going to tell Peter how he's going to die, and it's like, well, I can't. Yeah, to the point that like, oh yeah, you are. Like, oh yeah, you are.
Right? Because that's going to take a love that is a fruit. Agape love is a fruit of the Holy Spirit.
Right.
It's not just a love. It's not eros. It's not brotherly love. And yet we love our mates. Another part of this, we love our mates. How? Well, brotherly. When my wife's good to me, I'm good to her. She makes me dinner. She meets my expectations. When she fulfills all the needs I have, we're good. But that is not what Jesus asked. He said, would you agape like I've loved the church? I want you to love your wife. That's a whole different story. When she's not going to give, when she's not, my expectations have to be lowered. Are you kidding me? And so it begins to look at love different. You look at love where Jesus is the vine, we're the branches, and we produce love. The greatest of all of these is love. And so what am I producing fruit for? Well, for people to come and just eat it. Well, what are they going to do for me? I don't know. I'm going to get that from the great reservoir of Jesus. And when I start getting what I need from Christ, I can give without worrying about it running dry. That's the basics, very basics.
Well, it's like hugely illuminating because interestingly, I interviewed a pastor not long ago who talked all about that very idea that the fruits of the Spirit are not like, oh, I'm going to go love, and so it's not like that.
Right.
That this is something that you have to tend the garden. You got to keep the weeds out. You got to be fed in the Word. You got to abide. You got all this stuff, and then as a fruit, then you get patience or long suffering, depending on how you want to define all that. Then you get this, and so what you're talking about, I've tracked with that because I'm like, okay, so he's told him to feed my sheep, take care of my lambs. In other words, he's giving him a practical way to tend his garden, and that it would bear fruit.
Right.
And that
what's
fruit
the greatest fruit of all is that all these things we do as unto the Lord for the purposes. And I think I've turned my wife into God. I needed the things I needed. I wanted her to supply. And she, being the most wonderful woman in the world, doesn't still measure up to God.
Right.
My friends don't. And so I'm crying out.
Your radio talk show host clearly doesn't.
Well, I'm just saying. I'm crying out. My soul's crying out. Do you love me? Do you even really care? Because you're not meeting my needs. But I'm trying to get her to meet the needs that I need Jesus to meet. And see, to tap into what God is doing to flow through me also causes my branches to grow, and I get strengthened, and I can bear
that makes
more
beautiful
fruit.
Wow, what a tremendous insight. Again, the book is "Do You Love Me?" Yes, no, maybe. Experiencing and Extending Tremendous Love by Aaron Taylor. So, who's Aaron Taylor?
Well, let me tell you one more thing that's in the book.
Okay,
then I'll tell you. Ready?
All right.
One of the chapters, just to get you wet your whistle.
My whistle's wet as it can be.
One of the chapters is how to destroy a good church.
Yeah.
How to wreck a good church. You know, that's exactly what happened. I started out in ministry. I was born out of I know how to say it other than this. My dad raped my mom.
Mm.
15-year-old pushed his way into the house, raped my mom. I was given up for adoption, and I was adopted into a family where God allowed me to grow. At 12 years old, I'm giving you a real Reader's Digest version, but at 12 years old, um, I preached my first sermon. I knew I was called of God, got baptized in the Holy Spirit, had my first sexual relationship with an older woman. I got drunk for the first time. I got stoned for the first time, did drugs and meth for the first time at 12 years old. There was a weighing in the balance of God trying to reach me and the enemy coming far hard against me. I say that to say that God restored and helped, walked me through a lot of rejection, a lot of hurt, a lot of pain. And the answer of trying to get people to love me had to get resolved. It took not only my high school years, it didn't only take coming to Jesus. It didn't take just knowing and walking with Jesus. It took years when finally I realized that God loves me. He genuinely and you don't appreciate that kind of love until you display that kind of love. And when you display it and you realize what it takes to love somebody, not for what they give you, but because God loves them. So we write this because it wrecked our church. I went from having millionaires in my church and full to taking where we love to love people from an arm's distance. We'd go out and love them from a long ways away. We had great ministries to feed the homeless and clothe them and help them. And one day God just said, but you don't journey with them. You don't walk with them. You don't get down in the mud and lift them up. You reach out to them, but you don't embrace them. And we're to bind up their wounds. So we wrecked our church. We started inviting in the homeless, not hoping they come, not allowing them to come, but compelling them to come. We began to encourage our people, find somebody that's broken. You see someone along the street, don't give them food. You go take them somewhere, you talk with them, and you listen to them. Build a friendship. We started feeding right out of our church on a Sunday morning, not a Thursday night, not a celebrate recovery, a Sunday morning, and said, come to church with us. And we lost a lot of people. And we gained the love of God demonstrated to our people as discipling them in loving others. And it's been the best journey. Now, financially, was it tough? Yeah. And you know what? God has abundantly provided in unique ways because they didn't have anything. The ones we were loving didn't have anything.
Oh
It's
yeah,
been
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah, yeah. I get it completely.
Been beautiful.
So Aaron Taylor's a pastor and of a church where?
In Eugene, Oregon.
Oh,
Yep.
wow! How cool is that?
Right in God's country with every liberal in the world. I think they hold the convention between Portland and Eugene all the time.
Well, interestingly, my radio show is on in Portland, and I have some of the best listeners that I have.
It's a great place to live. It's difficult, and all the Christians seem to be leaving us. I mean, I cannot start to count how many people moved to Tennessee, and Texas, Florida, and Montana, and Idaho, and I'm like, could anybody stay here, or are we just going to let this part melt into the sea? But you know what? I'm still there, and we're still going to preach Jesus.
Thank goodness, right?
Yeah,
And a plan where God gave, and like I am just so thrilled at what God. It never ceased to blow me away that I've been really thinking a lot about that passage lately. Um, we actually do a Bible study in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I'm involved in a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But in my actual neighborhood with my neighbors, and we
right.
just like 2 weeks ago were right here studying this very thing, and broke out into this large discussion. And this one person was saying, well, Peter was just saying, man, I like you. And I said, no, man, it wasn't just I like you. It was more than that.
I agree.
But this brings a new light to that. to where, and I always had the sense that Jesus was calling him to something
Right.
that was more than
Greater.
just restoring him. I know he was
Yeah.
restoring him, but he was really calling him, and now I see,
Calling him into relationship.
right?
I mean, and you say, well, wait, no, when you do it unto the least of these, my brother, you're loving me. And again, it's not, my relationship with God gets better. It's like when you don't have kids, you think you know about it. Then you have kids and you go, oh, that's what having kids is about. And that's what that kind of love, that's Sturgio. That's what that kind of love is. You don't know it. You think you know it till you do it. And then you know it. And loving others, once you love like Christ, you're bonded with him like you didn't know you were.
So
So,
I teach special needs
oh,
at my church. Funny story along these lines is that I was invited to teach the largest Sunday school class, which had about 150 people in it. And without checking with my wife, I immediately thought, "Whoa, yeah, that's me. We're going to do that." And so they were so excited about it. They went and voted the church. I was the teacher before my wife knew anything about it. And so I go to my wife and I was like, "Tammy, this was 22 years ago." I said, "Tammy, good news. We're now the teachers of the Ham Sunday School class." And she goes, "No, we're not." I'm like, "What do you mean, no, we're not?" And she goes, "No, I really feel like God's called me that we're going to teach special needs." Well, we have no special needs in our family. I have no connection with this. I'm like, and this is how arrogant, okay, just so anybody that thinks that Robbie's not arrogant, here's how arrogant I was. I said, "Honey, what am I going to do? All this unbelievable Bible knowledge that I have, I can't share it with those people. It's a total waste."
yeah.
And she looked at me like, that's the beauty of having a wife, like, are you ridiculous or what? I mean, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like, this is what we're doing. I'm telling you, this is what we're doing. So I had this men's group.
Yeah.
I go and meet with them, and one of those guys was an old missionary, like he was on the field for like 30 years or whatever, and I'm telling them all my story, thinking they're going to totally go
Right.
with me, right? And like they're going to vote with me on this. This is the no-brainer. And they and Archie looks at me, and I'll never forget it to the last day. He says, "Hey, Robbie, unto the least of these, my brother." And I was like, "You dog, like," and so I'm like, okay. So I laid down the Ham Sunday School class. I go to this class, right? And I come for like 3 weeks, and these people are like punching the air, and they're acting, and these are adults,
Right.
so they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s. Some of them older than me, and I'm just like freaked out. Like I don't know what to do. And about the third week, the teacher of the class says, "Robbie, I hear you're a pretty good teacher. Next week we're going to teach on the fifth commandment. What do you think about doing that?" And I'm like, "What the heck? I can't teach my own kids the fifth commandment. How am I going to teach that one? Right? It's honor thy father and thy mother." So
Right.
I'm like, okay. So I start the week like, okay, God, how in the world do I teach this?
Right.
Because he had me right where he wanted me. Like, there's no way in the world I know how to teach this. And he said, "Robbie, how do you honor?" And I said, "Well, I guess you get down on your knees." And so he said, "Yeah, there you go. There you go. Just show it. Just as simple as it can get. Just make it simple." Okay. So I go to the class that day, and I teach this thing. I get a flannel graph of a mother and a father, and I do everything I can because I really don't have a clue what I'm doing. And this uh, they're looking out the window. They're doing anything but looking at me. And I am certain that I've done absolutely nothing for an hour-long class until the parents show up. And when the parents show up, guess what happens?
They get down on their knees.
They get down on their knees.
It's awesome.
And the parents go, "What's this?" Well, and one of the late teachers said, "Robbie was teaching on honor thy father," and the tears. Like, their kids learned something from, and like, oh my gosh. And what happened? I would have told you, God taught me, like, what?
That's it. You never lose.
Right.
You never
Like,
lose.
And so when you say, because I went into that thinking I got nothing,
Right.
but that isn't it at all. Because it is that, like, man, God will show you stuff.
So one of the things in the book I talk about this reservoir of love because people are always worried about burnout or we're gonna lose. You know when we tap into this reservoir of love and realize that no matter when I go back, my needs are met. That that God is there, an unending flow of His love and acceptance for me. It changed forgiveness. It changed all that. And what you're talking about, I think pastors, I'm guilty of it. We take a subject like this. Really, this is a simple thing, yet it's really deep and complex. Isn't that exactly what Jesus does in His Word? He takes these really intellectual, really deep subjects and He makes them simplest to these fishermen and to the prostitute and to the tax collector, and He shares the gospel in such a simple way. I think love's been overlooked. We know that we know what it's supposed to be, but we're disconnected with it. And you know what those disabled people did for you? They showed you how abled that you can be in God. I mean, I start to realize, wait a second. I started to think, well, I need some more respect. But what happens when I share the simple things and it's really the simple ones that hear the word and they don't have so much baggage, they respond to it and it brings, I mean,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
brings
yeah.
life.
It does.
And for me to take this, how great God is, and to be able to share that with somebody, and it seems so much bigger than life, so much more than I can share. And then you look at them and you think that, I've been pastoring forever and I've traveled all over the world. I've been to Africa, I've been to the Philippines, and I've held little babies that are dying, and you start to realize, I don't have to be all that. Because really, we preach trying to make us sound good and be somebody.
Oh, I get it.
And this book, to me, changed everything when I can share the simplest love. It might be what I say, it might be what I do, it might just be showing respect to somebody who hasn't earned it. Because you know what? God earned my respect.
Right.
God earned my love. So they don't have to. God has forgiven me. I forgive others. Only because, in fact, one of the things in this book that I share, I'm going to have the whole book done if we're not careful. But one of the things I share in this book, and you talked about groups, I wrote it so that you could read it individually, but I also wrote it so you could get together as a church group and answer some questions after each chapter, so that as church groups you can get together and study through this. And we sell it in bulk on our website at mycrossfire.com. We sell it so that church groups can, get 10, 15. We give them a big discount and say, hey, you do it together, grow together as a community. But my wife, I always was, hey, if you're faithful to me, I'm faithful to you, we'll stay together, right? Like it was some kind of a threat. Like, well, as long as you never cheat on me, we're okay, right? As long as you pull your weight, we're okay. That's not unconditional love.
No.
You say, well, but the church gives, the
Yeah.
Bible gives the right for divorce on, if there's infidelity. Yeah, because we can't forgive, but we can with the grace of God. And look at this for a second. I went to my wife. God laid this on me, and one day He just said, Aaron, you've been unfaithful to me, and I forgave you. Now, I have a wife who's never been unfaithful that I'm aware of. I have no reason to think she ever will be. I have the best wife in the world. Mainly because she's doing the same thing I'm doing. We're going to love Jesus and let Him love through us. Right. Well, it makes it a lot easier when that starts to happen. But I got to say this. I went to her and I said, honey, I just want to tell you something. If you were to cheat on me in the future, or if you have, I want you to know we're going to work through it and I'm going to love you. I'll never divorce you. And she's like, where'd that come from? I said, because I've been unfaithful to Jesus more times than I want to count. And I want Him to forgive me. And I want Him to love me. And it brings up the story of the prodigal son. When he came back, he got a ring and a robe, and he got shoes.
And a steak dinner.
Yeah, and a steak dinner. But you know about those shoes, something we miss? Those shoes allowed him to not be a servant and not be a slave. Those shoes gave him the ability to walk away again. And you're not in true relationship until you give the power for somebody to walk away from you. If they don't have the power to not love you, to reject you,
Right?
then
Wow, that's heavy.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I
get it.
realized I was trying to hold my wife to a law instead of giving her shoes and saying, I love you, and I'm going to love you in a way you'll never want to walk away from me again. I got a call from this. Someone read the book. This man reads the book. He calls me. He says, Pastor, he says, my wife cheated on me. I left. I moved out. I was going to fight for my kids. I hired a divorce attorney. I was done. And I read your book. And I went home and I asked my wife if I could move back in. And I told her not only have I forgiven her, I then told her all the failures that I had done that I didn't tell her. I told her I was struggling with pornography and masturbation, and I wasn't being the husband because I wasn't living right. And I asked her to forgive me. He said it changed our whole love.
Oh, yeah.
Once I let God love me, I learned how to love someone else.
Isn't that awesome?
Awesome.
Wow, that's powerful. Well, we got to
go. I know.
I hate it. Again, the book is Do You Love Me? Yes, No, Maybe. Experiencing and Extending Tremendous Love by Aaron Taylor. And again, your website is
mycrossfire.com, or you can go to Amazon and just put Do You Love Me? It'll pop right up. Aaron Taylor.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Great talking to you. Great
Same
stories.
Here. Oh, yeah. Wow.